the market gonna crash or not? Are you worried about a housing bubble? As more signs indicate the housing market is on a fast-paced upward trajectory, many are wondering, are we entering a housing bubble? So today we're going to break that down and dissect and kind of let you know what our thoughts are behind that. It's also hard to talk about though too, because it's like we're in the industry, so it's like, we don't want to talk about this. We don't want to think about this. This is like the negative stuff. We want to do lots of real estate, not worrying about a housing bubble.
Yeah, but where it's the biggest investment anybody's ever going to make, it's like, I want to know, is my house going to make me money or am I going to lose money?
Absolutely. All right, well, let's dissect the differences on what happened in 2008. Everybody knows of the major crash that we had in 2008. Lots of people lost their homes. Lots of just drama that went on in the real estate industry. So I think it'll be a good way for us to dissect that and talk about what happened in 2008 versus what's going on in the current market with some of the stats that we have.
So what caused the crash 15 years ago?
Well, I mean, I think it started with a lot of the builders overextending the inventory and getting way ahead of themselves, and in today's market they're selling homes as they build them instead of getting out ahead of themselves.
That's true. And a lot of purchasers are more qualified now. I don't think they weren't really truly qualified to buy a home back in 2008. The lending standards were a lot lower than they are now.
Absolutely. And the appraisals, we saw a lot of inflated appraisals back in 2008 where there was a lot of shady business that was done. Lenders and appraisers seemed to be working together to get more deals done, which ultimately led to a big part of the crash and what happened.
And then there was a lot of homeowners that were just cashing in their equity. So when the market did crash and went down, so many people were underwater.
Oh yeah, that is, I hadn't thought about that one, that's true. Well, let's dig into the millennials then. There is a higher millennial demand for housing right now with Gen Z coming up right behind them. So that's a big factor in what the housing market's gonna look like in the future with all of these new buyers that are just now entering the market.
Mm-hmm. Well, demand for home ownership now is real, and the millennials and the Gen Z are just contributing to that, because before it wasn't real, it was artificially inflated. Whereas now there's so many more buyers than we have sellers, and so that's what's creating this market.
Yeah, it really feels like a supply and demand kind of situation that we're in now, which I think is really one of the strongest factors that is making our trajectory look good for the next, good grief, however many years.
Also, the pandemic contributes a lot to what's going on now, because people stayed in their homes and they were realizing how much they didn't like that house, and it's like they discovered things that they never knew they needed, like a home office, because so many people were working from home as opposed to going into the office, and it really did change our entire way of life and the way that we view the world.
Well, I think it's taken people away from the tiny home mentality, because people are with the pandemic are like, oh my God, I need a place that I can do everything, function in, and tiny homes you can't function in.
Yeah, that's an interesting factor too, because a lot of people are moving further out. They're pushing outside of the city limits into more rural areas, so that they can get more space to kind of have that breathing room.
It makes a huge difference when you have a home that has what you need, as opposed to just the bare necessities, which a tiny home does.
Yeah, painful pandemic and a tiny home.
Who would have thought a pandemic would change the entire housing industry?
I know, it certainly made us expand our square footage. We realized
we don't like being on top of each other.
We want a bigger home, and we want to move out into a little bit further out so we can have that square footage. So I can personally say that was true for us. So another factor I think is the strong job market. With more tech companies moving their operations to Texas, with lower cost of living and more favorable tax laws, we've got all these companies moving into the area. Tesla, Google, Amazon, SpaceX, Apple,
Facebook, Canva, Oracle, Hewlett Packard, Samsung, Facebook.
Wait, did you say Facebook again?
We like Facebook, okay?
Twitter!
We prefer Twitter.
Facebook!
Twitter! Twitter!
Twitter.
Tesla is going to have several battery plants, one in Yuling, one in Martindale. They're going to be bringing their headquarters to Maxwell. They have a tunneling company in Bastrop, and then their truck division, which is going to be over in East Austin.
Very nice.
And then the rumor I heard is, or we've been seeing on social media, is that a Texas man donated 100 acres to Twitter in the Gerald area. So that would bring Twitter to Austin. That's going to be huge.
Yeah, Twitter. Love it. Oh, good grief. We've got Chef Ramsay brought his headquarters here.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there was
Spring Branch, isn't it?
With stricter lending standards, it means that people who can't truly afford a home won't be buying a home.
yeah, personally just going through getting a mortgage, it felt much more stringent than it had in the past. There were a lot more standards set. It was much tougher to get through the mortgage process this time than I had experienced in the past. So I feel like that process kind of weeds a lot of people out too. If you don't have all the documentation, you're not seeing the no doc lenders these days. You're really seeing lenders requiring more documentation and just better qualifying overall.
And with appraisals, the lender's not even allowed to talk to the appraiser, whereas before they could. So that left too much room for shady deals.
Mm-hmm. That is true. Another factor too, foreclosures are at a record low right now. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out with the moratorium. Is that what it's called? The coming up after COVID. But right now we're still at record lows, which is playing a factor too in the supply and demand.
Yeah, people are still in the forbearance process, and rumor has it we're hearing that there's going to start processing the forbearances and foreclosing on them maybe towards the end of this year.
But I don't think it's going to be as big of a problem, because while there may be some foreclosures, they've got a lot of interest as well. So if they sell before they're actually foreclosed on, then they can actually still benefit from the equity that they have.
Those sellers are just going to have to be proactive and make decisions sooner rather than later and take advantage of the equity that they have in their house, because waiting is going to be a huge catastrophe. But again, I don't think that's going to play a huge part in what we see in the future of real estate.
And supply is so low that if there are homes that go onto the market because of foreclosure, they're going to get snatched up really quick.
Absolutely. I really think it comes down to a supply and demand factor. Right now, there's just not enough supply, and there's still a huge demand. We've got those millennials and the Gen Z coming up right behind them, wanting houses. I don't see a huge shift. I see a huge opportunity.
Really?
You know, there might be a little bit of chaos.
Well, I also think there's a supply and demand on all levels of the building industry. You know, with the builders, the supply and demand for materials, the supply and demand for, you know, appraisers, all the industry.
All levels of.
Yes, there's not enough supply for the demand. I think an important topic is that the interest rates are normalizing.
Yeah.
Because, you know.
That's true. They were at historic lows. Like
Yeah.
1-2%. When they were.
Yeah, we can talk to that.
There was a day that, you know, interest rates were 8%.
There was a day interest
10%.
rates were 10%.
Yeah.
when I got started in real estate, interest rates across the board were 10 to 12%, and that was normal. And there was still people buying houses.
26 years ago, I bought a house at 10%, so.
Absolutely. So, honestly, at 5%, and the predictions are saying that it might go up a little bit more from here, but they're really normalizing. I don't really see them. I don't see this to be anything that's too alarming. I think we got to take advantage of a huge opportunity when they were down in the twos, in a couple of years ago.
We've just gotten used to the super low. We're not used to normal.
Yeah.
We just have to get used to normal again.
Yeah, I feel like normal is sign of a healthy economy, so I don't find this to be alarming at all. And we've got lots of buyers that are buying, with interest rates of 5%. They're still getting their dream homes. They're still getting the square footage that they want, and their payments are still numbers that they're comfortable with. So it feels good to be in a healthy economy with stabilizing rates.
And with the stricter lending practices, those who are still qualifying for loans at this rate are going to keep those homes. They're not going to use it as a piggy bank
Absolutely.
to go on vacation or fund their lifestyle. It's going to be something that I think we've gotten a lot wiser.
Yeah, we did learn from 2008, those of us that went through it. I was personally in the industry during those years, and I was new to the business at that time, so I really didn't know a lot different, but honestly, there was still lots of opportunity in all of the chaos. There were lots of buyers that were still looking. People always have to sell, they always need to buy. So even, if things do shift a little bit, which I think they change at all times, right? In real estate, nothing's ever stagnant. Things are changing and evolving all the time. So it's just getting used to it and adapting to the next phase of it.
Real estate's one of those things that you can always count on to change.
Always changing.
Always.